Hi, Erica here. I'm the president of TEDxUT Austin this year. With the pandemic keeping us inside, we've all had plenty of time, maybe a little bit too much time, to reflect on ourselves, to examine the world around us, and to deal with the disruptions to our day-to-day lives. Today, we'll dive into those reflections as we explore the idea of breakthrough. Certainly in the way you've probably already thought of as that light bulb coming on in your head after staring at a problem for several hours, but more critically, we'll be tackling the idea of breaking through to figure out what our future may look like. Our performers and speakers today investigate the ways in which we are able to intentionally break free of those preconceived notions of what are best practices in mental health, in design, in technology, in the ways we perceive others, and in politics to create exits and the freedom to explore outside of the status quo. I'm so excited to share with you guys what we have prepared over the last year. But before we dive into that, I did want to say that this is the first, or at least our first, free TEDx conference. So we would love if you took this time to share the link with a friend or family member you think would enjoy our talks. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Fall 2020 conference.
Hey, guys. My name is Anti-Colorism, and I'm the VP Logistics here at TEDxUTAustin. I have with me Erica, our president, and welcome to our conference. You know, none of us really expected to be here, especially as we were ramping up for our in-person conference in the spring. But our team, our speakers, and our performers have been hard at work, and I'm super excited to be here with Erica, live emceeing our first and free virtual event.
I couldn't agree more. I am so proud of all of the work everyone has put in and wanted to give a special shout out to Abhishek Dasgupta, our president last year. I can't claim credit for all that has been done today. Abhi and our entire team from last year built an incredible foundation that made it possible for us to get all of this together in time for the fall.
And all of that brings us here, together with y'all today. TEDx is about bringing communities of thinkers and doers together to share their passions and ideas. Being here in Austin is especially a blessing. I love being in a community that not only is diverse in many ways, but embraces that diversity. Austin is a place where keeping things weird meets the tech startup world, meets traditional Texas barbecue. And as TEDxUTAustin, a student-led organization, it is our privilege to bring together this community of tech innovators, musicians, and so many more people on one common platform to showcase ideas worth sharing.
As Shama touched on, it's important to us that even though we're not together in person, that y'all get something special from living this event live. Those of you who RSVP'd should have received a Padlet link prior to the event that you can access throughout the day to engage in discussion and post your thoughts and feelings about today's talks. For those of you who didn't get the chance to RSVP, we'll also be sharing the Padlet link using one QR code throughout the day following each talk that you'll be able to scan at any point.
So to kick us off, we're going to do a quick word cloud and just do a check-in and see where everyone is from. So if we can share the screen, please go to menti.com and type in this code to tell us where exactly you are coming from. In the meantime, I'd like to tell you about our Instagram giveaway. So for the past week, we've been raffling off a $50 brew bike gift card. And so if you'd like to enter, please go to our Instagram at TEDxUTAustin and enter your giveaway.
Looks like we got a lot of people coming here from Austin. Thank you all for sharing where you're from, and a special thank you to those of you tuning in from another time zone. While we would love for y'all to stay for as much of the conference as possible, we understand that it simply may not be feasible for many of you. To ensure you don't miss anyone you're especially looking forward to, we wanted to take a moment to share our schedule for the day. Feel free to take a screenshot to reference throughout the day or check out our description below for the run of show.
But before we dive into our talks, there's a few people we want to give a special thank you to, without whom this event wouldn't have been made possible. I'd like to thank our lead sponsors, the Office of the Executive Vice President and Provost, specifically Vice Provost and Dean David Platt. A big thank you to Texas Development for their ongoing sponsorship and partnership. A special thank you to Mr. Scott Rabinald, Megan Canny, and Lee Bash. Thank you to the Cockrell School of Engineering for allowing us to use their space for filming our talks. Dean Sharon Wood, Patrick Wiseman, and Susie Winfield have been long-term supporters of TEDxUTAustin. Thank you, guys. Special thanks to the Blackstone Launchpad, Austin Technology Incubator, and the E&E Events Co-Sponsorship Board. And last but not least, thank you to our champion sponsor, the School of Undergraduate Studies. Special thank you to Dean Brent Iderson. Thank you to Mitch Jacobson, Shannon Lundquist, Teddy Owen, and Melinda Heinrich. And special shout out to Shannon for her birthday today. So from all of us at TEDxUTAustin, happy birthday, Shannon. Now, without further ado, I'll pass it off to Nancy to introduce our first speaker.
As VP Curation this past year, I worked with Tammy, Anjika, Kelly, Kyle, and Pyrcsz to work with speakers to help refine their talks and translate their ideas more effectively. Curation realizes that people have ideas worth sharing, and we want to help amplify their voices through the TEDx platform. However, not all places provide space for different types of voices. Our next speaker knows quite a bit about this, as she has experienced many difficulties as an Asian American and a member of the March for Our Lives movement. Despite these experiences, Kelly Choi, a junior at UT Austin studying government and creative writing, continues to show up and push forward. And she hopes to empower other Asian American youth to get involved in their communities and create change.
"60 days, 24 states, 20 activists, 1 Asian American." In the summer of 2018, I was a member of March for Our Lives' nationwide youth civic engagement tour, Road to Change. I hopped on a bus from Houston, Texas, went all the way to Oakland, California, speaking with survivors of gun violence and youth doing amazing work within their own communities, as well as speaking on panels about gun violence prevention and youth civic engagement. It was one of the most transformative and life-changing moments of my life, yet it was also one of the most difficult. Not only was it difficult because I was talking about gun violence every single day in nearly every single one of my conversations, but being the only Asian American identifying person on that tour also proved to be a challenge. This challenge culminated in one night. I was in a hotel room with all of my friends, and at this point, we had gotten to know each other pretty well. We were hanging out, having a good time, until 2 of my friends started making fun of another guy's feet. They were joking around, saying stuff like, "Why do they look like that?" Until he got angry, and suddenly it wasn't a joke. He looked at them and yelled, "Well, I'm sorry the Ching Chong lady messed up my feet." The room went silent, and I was, to say the least, shocked. This was supposed to be a safe space, meaning this was supposed to be a space where something like that should not have been said, but it was. And I am lucky enough to be in places where young people are doing incredible things, places where change is happening. But I learned to stop being grateful for simply having the opportunity to gain a platform and to start getting comfortable with critiquing the spaces I am in as a member of a movement and as an Asian American. Through this, I hope to prevent things like what happened to me from happening in other organizing experiences, as well as to encourage people in my community to show up and be active members of change. Looking back at my experiences and at the microaggressions I encountered on that tour and in other progressive spaces, I realized that the core issue was less about representation and more about the overall lack of education and a need to make fundamental changes within society. In short, there were several reasons as to why I was the only Asian American on that tour, and many of them were years in the making. I am a big believer in learning from the past, but we need to make a point at learning history that isn't Eurocentric or whitewashed. How many of you remember learning about a significant Asian American figure in your textbook? Or about the lived experiences of Japanese internees? I wouldn't be surprised if nothing came to mind. Not many countries like to disseminate information about the atrocities they've committed to other groups of people. For example, when I was a junior in high school learning about World War II, I remember learning a lot about the triumphs of the Allied powers and the horrors committed by the Axis powers. We then spent maybe 1 or 2 slides, not days, slides, on the internment of Japanese people. Sugarcoating history is not a novel thing, especially in Texas history classes. Did you know that the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, also known as TEKS, requires 0% of its content to include Asian Americans? I didn't learn the story of Vincent Chin, a Chinese American man who was brutally murdered by 2 white men over their frustrations of the success of the Japanese auto industry, or about Yuri Kochiyama, a Japanese American internee and civil rights activist. I didn't learn that the term Asian American came from radical roots to fight racism, imperialism, and degrading politics. I didn't learn any of this until I came to UT and took an Intro to Asian American Studies course this past spring. But these stories, the stories of Asian American people, places, and events, matters. Telling them helps break monolithic stereotypes and barriers put up internally and externally to prevent Asian Americans from being civically engaged, like being a part of nonprofits, which are traditionally white spaces. It took a while for March for Our Lives to get where it is now, and the organization is still evolving, learning, and growing. Through this process, I got to see the impact of relearning history firsthand. In April, I led a virtual March for Our Lives workshop about xenophobia and explained how anti-Asian sentiment did not begin with COVID-19. After talking about the perpetual foreigner stereotype, as well as the Model Minority Racial Project and the story of Vincent Chin, all the participants were put into breakout rooms to process and divulge the content. Many of them expressed how this was their first time learning any of this. And one person even cried, feeling guilty as to how little she knew about Asian American history before my short seminar. Now, I'm not here to make anyone feel guilty. I frankly don't want your guilt. But I do think it's okay to make people feel uncomfortable. Facing that discomfort and trying to understand why something makes you uncomfortable is how we start to unlearn and dismantle the sugar-coated version of this world we were taught in schools. This process of unlearning and learning is an important facet of becoming more involved with organizing and civic engagement. And it's something that Asian Americans must do with ourselves, within our communities, and we're discussing our place in this country. Many of you may have heard that Asian people don't vote because we don't have to. We don't have to be civically engaged since we are the model minority. We are successful, driven, crazy rich. These stereotypes could not be more wrong. Asia is comprised of 48 different countries. But in the United States, those 48 countries are compressed into one label called Asian American. Grouping the Asian American experience as one model minority trivializes and undermines the individual struggles and experiences that each Asian American has to go through. In the United States, Southeast Asian Americans have the lowest high school graduation and bachelor degree rates. Furthermore, 13% of Asian Americans, this includes East Asian, Southeast Asian, live in poverty. The White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders also did a study that showed that this demographic is the least likely to get healthcare. So reducing the Asian American experience allows for complacency by lawmakers when they write education or healthcare policy and hurts the community as a whole. Are there successful Asian Americans? Of course. There are many, in fact, who benefit from and lean into the model minority myth to gain proximity to whiteness. But Asian Americans, especially those with lighter complexions, must remember that we will never be white and we will never attain white privilege. In turn, we must recognize how we can perpetuate anti-Blackness and white supremacy so that we can achieve our collective liberation. A part of the reason why it seems like Asian people aren't civically engaged or part of large movements is because this work requires community and partnership. But there is a valid distrust of the Asian American community. The story of Richard Aoki is a good example. Richard Aoki is an Asian American who has garnered attention and recognition for his work with the Black Panther Party. He became a figure of solidarity of Black and Asian co-organizing efforts. But in 2012, it was revealed that he was actually tasked to be an FBI informant and was giving critical information about the Black Panther Party to the FBI. This is appalling. The only Asian American with a leadership position in the Black Panther Party was actually actively working to dismantle it. And this precedent has presented itself today. At the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak, it seemed like assaults against East Asian people were rising more than the illness did itself in the US. But when I saw Asian Americans post about these attacks and condemning them, they would end their comments with things like, "Why don't y'all rally for Asian Americans the same way you do other people of color?" But we need to stop doing this and stop playing oppression Olympics. Other minorities don't owe us anything. In fact, other Black, Indigenous people of color have shown up for us time and time again through the anti-Vietnam War protests, helping increase access to immigration, and more. So this is my reminder that Asian Americans, we must not only rally to our own causes. I would see tweets from Asian American youth talking about the coronavirus doesn't give you an excuse to be racist to Asian people, but 2 tweets before that would have the N-word in it. We are stronger together than we are apart. So Asian Americans must not be afraid to hold each other accountable and to be in solidarity with others. There are people who did this and did this well, like Yuriko Chiyama, who I mentioned earlier, who was a prominent civil rights activist and one of Malcolm X's closest confidants, or Grace Lee Boggs, who worked her entire life to alleviate poverty in Detroit's communities with methods like mutual aid. Their activism was beyond themselves. And this is something I had to learn as well. By learning from and working with non-Asian organizers, I became a better organizer and person. Going back to that night, I heard the words "ching chong lady" ring through the hotel room. I didn't think I had this voice. I didn't know how to critique someone in a powerful and progressive space because I assumed everyone knew better. So that night, I opened my mouth, expecting the best comeback in the world to come out, but nothing. But people aren't perfect. And we grew up in a racist and prejudiced country that doesn't easily give us the tools to dismantle this thinking. So I left the room and I thought a lot about the reason I was there. I joined March for Our Lives because of the cause, because of the issue of gun violence and the passion I have to end it. And even though I was the only Asian American on that tour, I wasn't alone. Those two friends from earlier had my back and helped me hold that person accountable. The conversation wasn't easy, but it was one of the first times that I had to confront the idea that no place is perfect and it's okay to continue relearning and learning. Moving forward, I will not be the token Asian. I cannot represent 48 different countries as a Korean American. But I will continue to critique the spaces I am in and be a critical thinker. And ask myself, what does a safe space look like? What does that mean for the youth organizing community, the Asian American community, for BIPOC solidarity, and for our collective liberation? But I will continue to reimagine the spaces I am in, and I encourage and challenge you to do the same. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Kelly, for being so vulnerable about your experiences. I think you've brought up something incredibly poignant. I find myself regularly learning and unlearning the ways that I exist and interact with people in the spaces I'm in, whether that means calling out that my opinion doesn't stand for the opinion of all Asian Americans or stepping back in spaces where my voice certainly shouldn't be the loudest.
Same. I never put much thought to the lack of Asian American representation in my history classes or the breadth of what the term Asian American encompasses. Generalizing and categorizing 48 different countries into one label is definitely not ideal. And rather than trying to fit them in a box, we should highlight and celebrate the differences between these cultures.
As we mentioned earlier, if y'all would like to join in on the discussion, scan this QR code or visit the link in your Eventbrite email to share your thoughts and feelings about Kelly's talk. With that said, I'll pass it off to Connor to introduce our next speaker.
Hi, everyone. This past year, I've had the opportunity of working on the logistics committee alongside Claire Croman, Gabe Galupo, and Miriam Syed, and I look forward to continuing my new role as VP Finance next year. I'm speaking to you from the steps of Gregory Gym at the heart of campus, a place that is solely dedicated to physical health and well-being and is integrated into the daily lives of so many students. But what if seeking mental health advice was as normalized as going to the gym? Our next speaker, Maytal Eyal, who is currently completing her PhD in counseling psychology and is both a trained therapist and certified yoga instructor, seeks to take on an innovative approach to mental health and wellness by redefining how mental health spaces integrate themselves into our everyday society. Let's hear what she has to say.
For the last 5 years, I've been pursuing my doctorate in counseling psychology. My dissertation was focused on helping teachers feel less stressed. I designed a group intervention program where I'd go into teachers' schools and I'd spend time with them running through different mindfulness practices. We talk about how to cope with stress, how to breathe in and out, and how to prioritize self-care. Across the last 5 years, I've run these groups in close to 15 schools. And my hope in doing all of this was to help teachers better cope with the very stressful nature of their profession. So there's one day amidst all my research that really stands out to me. It was a regular day, but it's kind of changed the way I see everything. So I just want to tell you about it. It was an October afternoon, and as some of you now know, being a graduate student often means running from one place to the next, and that's exactly what I was doing that day. I had just finished up a session with a client, and I was driving across town to make it to the school where I was leading that day's teacher group. I remember being stuck in so much traffic. I wanted to bang my head against the steering wheel, but I didn't. I made it. I found a parking spot. And I remember just piling on top of me all the things I needed that day. So name tags, pens, worksheets, packets, and snacks. And I remember juggling this pile of stuff with me and weaving through a bustling elementary school hallway where kids were laughing and screaming everywhere. And teachers were sitting hunched over, exhausted, holding giant megaphones in their hands, trying to operate that day's carpooling procedure. So despite this chaos, I finally found the classroom where I was leading that day's group. It was me and 6 teachers. We were sitting around in a circle in these small navy blue plastic chairs. And we were surrounded by all the things you'd expect to be surrounded by in an elementary school classroom. So there were star charts on the walls, crayons scattered around, and kids' drawings plastered everywhere. So as the group started, I started handing out the materials and delving into my typical spiel about mindfulness, about the power of focusing in on the present moment without any sort of judgment. At this point, I had given this introduction to mindfulness so many times. And I remember midway through doing it, just kind of mentally pausing. Like, you know, when your mouth is moving, but your mind is floating somewhere else? Well, that's what was happening to me in this moment. And where my mind floated to was towards an acute awareness of the immense exhaustion just exuding from these teachers' eyes. I mean, these teachers sitting across from me were so clearly tired and burnt out after a long school day. What was interesting about this group of teachers is that they weren't a uniquely stressed bunch. In fact, they really epitomized the plight of most educators within this country. They were being overworked, undervalued, and in my opinion, underpaid. They were working inside of an old school building infested with mold. They were trying to make ends meet despite missing basic materials for their students like pencils and textbooks. And they barely had time for lunch or any sort of break. I mean, they would have to eat their lunch in motion, moving from one room to the next in the middle of the day. So, as I was sitting with these 6 educators, telling them about how mindfulness was going to save them from stress, it hit me. These teachers, I could give them all of the tools, all of the mindfulness tools in the world, and they would still be haunted by stress and its multitude of health implications. These teachers weren't stressed because they weren't mindful enough or they weren't coping well enough. These teachers were stressed because they were operating inside of an educational system that was failing to prioritize them. I remember that day, the group closing out and walking out to the parking lot. And just thinking to myself, just asking myself, as a mental health professional, how am I really helping people if it's not necessarily individual people that need to change, but the systems around them that need to shift? Am I really being helpful if I'm not changing these systems, but I'm just giving people tools to cope with and even succumb to these broken systems that are failing them? So these questions became burned into my mind. I could not stop thinking about them. Not just in the context of teachers, but with my individual therapy clients as well. Because with my therapy clients, it didn't feel that different. They'd come into my office, they'd sit with me for 50 minutes a week. We'd talk coping skills, strategies, psychological practices. But then they would step back out into environments where they didn't feel supported, into environments where maybe they were experiencing bullying at school or persistent racial trauma, or maybe they were being pitted against a coworker in a toxic workspace. It was at this point in my education, in my career, where it became crystal clear to me. It's not just my clients that need to change, that need to do the work. It's the systems, the environments around them that need to shift. Just like a plant needs nutrient-dense soil to grow, individuals need healthy environments to flourish. Today, we have two dominant mental health models, psychotherapy and psychiatry. You're feeling sad, unmotivated, unable to get out of bed, well then maybe you want to go see a therapist, someone you can talk to once a week. If you're experiencing panic attacks, swirling, racing thoughts, a palpitating heart, well then maybe you'll get referred to see a psychiatrist, someone who can prescribe you medication to help mitigate these symptoms. These models in so many ways are amazing and effective. I mean, I've seen them work time and time again. However, I believe that they're just not enough. See, the thing about these models is that they're so focused on guiding the individual towards change, which is really important. But what these models are less focused on is transforming our environments and our systems into spaces that actively promote and sustain our collective mental health needs. This is incredibly important too. I want to take a second and just kind of zoom out, step back, and examine the mental health landscape all of us are living inside of today. And I want to do this because I want to show you why I don't think these models are enough for us. Today, mental health rates are skyrocketing, which is understandable. We're living inside of a global pandemic. Just as an example, this time last year, pre-COVID, 1 in 12 Americans were reporting symptoms of an anxiety disorder. Today, the number is 1 in 3. The Kaiser Family Foundation put out a survey last month. What they found is that 53% of Americans right now, that is over half of us, are experiencing mental health issues. So the numbers don't look good right now, right? But it makes sense. I mean, we're living inside of a pandemic. The thing is, what's so mind-blowing to me is that even before COVID existed, we were facing a global mental health crisis. The numbers didn't look good to begin with. I'll give you some examples just in the US alone. Before COVID, 1 in 5 Americans reported feeling lonely or isolated. From 2008 to 2016, rates of hopelessness and anxiety shot up 71% among young adults. Before COVID, rates of suicide were at the highest they had been since World War II. Before COVID, 130 people were dying per day of opioid use. I could go on and on with numbers and stats like this. But the point in why I'm saying this is because something is not right. We're missing an essential piece of the puzzle. If we are in this bad of a shape when it comes to our collective mental health, then it's pretty undeniable that our current models are falling short on us in one way or another. And so I'm here to tell you this. I believe that it is time for us to develop new dominant mental health models, models that are innovative, models that are preventive, models that supplement and bolster what already exists. I believe that these new models need to center around one primary purpose. The onus of mental health care cannot just fall onto individuals. It must fall just as much, if not more so, onto our existing social environments. Now, at this point in this TED Talk, I wish that I could tell you I've invented a shiny new model of mental health that's going to save us all. I haven't figured that out. And to be honest, I don't think one person can figure this out. I think this is a collective, multidisciplinary effort that's already started. And my hope is that with time, it grows stronger and more ubiquitous. So having said all this, what I've done, what I've made my life purpose, my mission, has been to talk to as many people as I can all over the world about what these new models could look like, what we could be doing better. I've had, over the last year, some incredible conversations with some amazing people, and I wish so much I could stand up here today and tell you about all of them. But I don't have that kind of time. So for the sake of time, I want to dial in on 2 of the individuals I had the opportunity to speak with. We'll start with Lorenzo Lewis from Little Rock, Arkansas. Lorenzo and I had the opportunity to speak on the phone a few times before and after the emergence of COVID in the US. And he was able to tell me about his grassroots movement, the Confess Project. The mission of the Confess Project is to transform mental health into a more accessible medium for men of color. Lorenzo and his team at the Confess Project developed something called the Barber Coalition, where they trained barbers in 14 cities across America in fundamental peer counseling skills like empathy, validation, non-judgment, challenging negative self-talk. See, Lorenzo did this because he believes that barbers can serve an essential role as mental health gatekeepers. He's even teamed up with researchers at Harvard to prove the significance of barbers in the realm of mental health. Lorenzo was inspired to create the Barber Coalition after he himself grew up spending time in his aunt's salon in Little Rock. He told me about how he would go in each day and observe the incredible interpersonal dynamics emerge in this community-oriented space. Like salons, barber shops are familiar spaces. They're spaces where formative relationships form, where many men can feel comfortable enough to open up about their life experiences. Lorenzo explained that a lot of men spend years, sometimes decades, sitting in their barber's chair. And over time, they grow to trust them, not just to hold a sharp razor to their heads, but to listen to the intricate and intimate stories of their lives. Lorenzo and I discussed that because men of color in this country experience repeated systematic oppression, it can be hard to trust a therapist who may seem representative of an institution that has historically discriminated against them. And so that's why Lorenzo wanted to bring mental health into the barbershop space. He wanted to bring mental health into a space that already felt familiar, where individuals already felt safe, already felt seen, and already felt heard. Another individual I spoke with was Ayako Shimizu from Tokyo, Japan. Ayako's interests lie in the intersection between gaming and mental health. Her and I also had the opportunity to speak a couple times before and after COVID. And she was able to tell me about how she became interested in this very unique niche. When Ayako was attending university, she witnessed one of her closest friends descend into a depressive episode. It was so hard for her to watch this because her friend didn't have the opportunity to reach out for help in the community. Ayako explained that at one point her friend reached out to a school counselor, but she was met with invalidation, with rejection. It was so hard to watch this because Ayako's friend eventually had to drop out of school, despite the fact that she was bright and super hardworking. Ayako explained to me that what she saw happen to her friend wasn't an isolated incident. She'd seen it happen to multiple peers. Ayako told me that in Japan, it still remains stigmatized to reach out for mental health services. And so that's why she wanted to create video games with embedded mental health interventions. By doing so, she deemed it possible to transform mental health into something less stigmatizing, more accessible, and entertaining. So Ayako has developed a couple games, and most recently, she developed a game where players get to live and work in a house filled with characters that possess diverse identities, experiences, struggles, and backgrounds. What is so cool about this game is that it's not just a regular video game. It is a mechanism for developing self-awareness and interpersonal skills. Essentially, Ayako has created gamified and therefore a more accessible version of social emotional learning. And this is, in my opinion, incredible. Ayako and Lorenzo have both done something spectacular. They have transformed familiar spaces, a barbershop, a video game landscape, into spaces that actively promote mental health. They've shown us that mental health does not need to remain confined within the walls of a therapist's office or a counseling center, a residential treatment facility, a hospital. Mental health can be creatively and innovatively infused into the multiple environments we each interact with day by day. To end today, I just want to ask you a few questions. What spaces in your life could you see benefiting from a shift like this? Maybe it's the gym you work out at, the school you attend, your workplace. Maybe it's the stories you read, media you interact with. Maybe it's even your own home. What do you think your community needs? Better yet, what do you think you can contribute to this sort of collective mental health shift? What I know is that to elicit this sort of shift, it can't just fall on me and my fellow mental health providers. This is an effort that requires all of us. We are all in this together. And so I end today with one final question for you. Are you ready to join me in this shift? I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, Maytal. I think we can all agree that society needs to shift towards being an environment that fosters mental health. I love the story about Lorenzo and the Barber Coalition. I think it's so easy to forget how important it is to have familiar places to open up for even a short time when you're caught in the whirlwind of life. If more aspects of our environment integrated mental health in a way that made us feel safe, seen, and heard, I'm sure it would create a positive environment for us all.
Agreed. I think this is such a relevant topic and one experiencing so much innovation right now. I know Maytal touched on some of the international a while ago on a TED radio hour, funny enough. The Friendship Bench is an initiative started in Zimbabwe by training grandmothers to provide basic cognitive behavioral therapy. The idea is that those grandmothers were already central to the community and people felt comfortable talking to them. And on the other side of that, the grandmothers got to spend time chatting with people throughout the day when otherwise they'd be at work. As a result, they've seen an 80% reduction in depression and suicide ideation. If y'all want to check those talks out, it's the TED Radio Hour called Erasing the Stigma.
Thank you so much for the recommendation, Erica. You guys can use the same link from earlier, or if you're joining right now, you can use the QR code to join the discussion for Maytal's talk. Now I'll pass it off to the directors of the Creative Culture Dance Company to tell you a little bit about their performance.
Hi, I'm Sarah Smith. I'm Gabby Melton. And we're the directors of Creative Culture Dance Company and the choreographers of the film, This Is How We Walk on the Moon. When we first started to discuss the concept of breakthrough, we were inspired to create a film about our experience as a dance company in the middle of a global pandemic. COVID-19 significantly impacted our relationships to dance and our relationships through dance. We were unable to share space, unable to energetically connect to each other. There were no open venues and no audiences for us to perform for. So essentially everything that shaped our experience as a dance company, all those pillars were pulled out from underneath us, and we had to reimagine ways that we could still connect to each other and still continue to grow as dancers and as a company.
We really enjoyed creating this film. It was one of the first projects we got to work on as a company since the pandemic. One of the ways that we wanted to portray the theme breakthrough is through the location. We shot it at a skate park in Austin, which was full of physical barriers and obstacles that the dancers had to utilize throughout the film. We also really liked that the skate park was an unconventional dance space, so that kind of pushed us all out of our comfort zone and forced us to be creative in that way. The breakthrough concept is also shown through the actual choreography. There's a lot of parts where the dancers are connected and they have to collaborate and work together to create new shapes and new moments. The beginning of the film, the colors are like dull and more neutral, and then at that breakthrough moment, you'll see that the colors become super saturated and bright and a lot more busy, which represents breakthrough and kind of wraps that up. So thank you so much, Ted, for giving us this opportunity, and we hope you enjoy our film, This Is How We Walk on the Moon.
Thank you.
Each step is moving, it's moving me up. Moving, it's moving me up. Every step is moving me up. I'm moving it up. Moving me up. Every step is moving me up. Each step is moving me up. Moving me up. One tiny It's all I need now. Jump over. Every step is moving me up. It's moving me up. Moving is moving me up. Each step is moving me up. Moving me up. Every step is moving me up. This is how we walk on the moon. This is how we walk on the moon. This is how we walk on the moon. Each step is moving, it's moving me up. Moving, it's moving me up. Every step is moving me up. I'm so far, yeah, it's moving me up. Moving, it's moving me up. Every step is moving me up. One tiny move. Oh, it's all I need tonight. I jump over.
That was stunning. A big thank you to the Creative Culture Dance Company for putting that together. Check out their website in the description to see more from them. Now, I'll pass it off to our VP Curation, Pyrcsz, to introduce our next talk.
Hey everyone. As you can see, I'm standing next to the statue of civil rights activist and political trailblazer Barbara Jordan. And while she obviously had to break down a lot of racial barriers to achieve her successes, recent events have shown us that this country is still far from achieving true equality. This serves as a good segue for the introduction of our next speaker, Tamiya Bethea. A Dallas, Texas native and international business graduate, Timia is dedicated to social impact work that promotes diversity and inclusivity. As one of the 4 founding members of the Color Complex, an organization awarded the President's Award for Global Learning, she and her team have done extensive research on the social impacts of colorism. Now, you might be wondering what colorism is and how it affects our society, or if you already are aware of it, what steps we can take to correct it. Well, luckily, we have an expert here to share those answers with us today. Let's listen in.
Hey, so I'm just gonna go ahead and break the ice. I can already feel a huge wave of discomfort and exhaustion coming from my listeners. And yes, I'm tired too. This year has definitely been rough. But if you think about it, there's been some plus sides. Like, we're all beginning to realize that there's issues out there and that white supremacy is alive and well. We're beginning to confront those issues and realize that it takes every single one of us to dismantle this oppressive and pervasive system. I know, we've got COVID on one hand, a pandemic that has changed everyday lives. Then we have Black Lives Matter, where it's really making a lot of people uncomfortable. But all of this is really just bringing up debris, really showing us that it takes every single one of us to dismantle this oppressive and pervasive system that we live under. And hey, if you haven't had this aha moment in the past couple of months, you must not be on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, any of the social media platforms. Honestly, it all got me thinking, while everyone's been using this time to have their wake-up call, mine happened a while back. All right, it's story time. Picture this. Fall 2013, me, a young whippersnapper who just got a bright idea, I go up to my mom, so excited to hear what she thought. Her words, "Good luck with that, Timia. Your hair, it's a lot more difficult than you think." Whoa, this is what my mom told me when I said to her for the very first time that I wanted to stop getting relaxers. For the majority of my childhood, I didn't even know what my actual hair texture looked like because I got it chemically straightened. And now, around this time, at age 15, I could tell that my mom's face spoke way more volumes than her words did. It told me that society was not gonna think that my hair was beautiful. Deep down inside, I already knew what it was gonna say. It was gonna say that my hair was too kinky, too difficult, too hard to manage, too rough. Oh, and of course the dreaded words, too nappy. For most Black women all around the world, the kinkier your hair texture is, the more these words and its connotations are stuck to you. Now let's cut to summer 2016. I like to call this the glory summer. I was having a good time. It's right before freshman year. I was going to Virginia for a family reunion, and I was at my papa's house when all of a sudden we were eating breakfast, and he said very seriously, looking across the table at both me and my sister, "Tamiya, you're going to have a lot more opportunities because of your lighter skin complexion. Jalen, your sister, she's gonna deal with a lot more because she has a darker skin tone." That was a hard pill to swallow. Both me and my sister are Black women, and we deal with both racism and sexism in our lifetimes, but I'm supposed to have more opportunities in life just because of my lighter skin? Both those moments in 2013 and 2016 had me bugging, like, what did it all mean? I didn't understand it. It wasn't after much digging and a lot of soul searching that it hit me. My mom and my papa's reaction, they were a lot more protective and defensive to how they grew up in society. It's connected to a phenomenon that don't nobody wants to talk about. It all comes down to one word: colorism. Colorism is most commonly known as the prejudice or discrimination against those with darker skin tones. This is different from racism. I can already see some people getting confused, but this is different because this form of discrimination happens largely within communities of color, where people of color have been conditioned to police themselves as well as their own people based on appearance. It was a term coined by Pulitzer Prize winner Alice Walker in 1982. But y'all, 2020, it really demands a new definition. Colorism is not just the prejudice or discrimination against those with darker skin tones. This is a huge part of it, but what we're missing are two other things. It also holds featureism, where people with non-white features are discriminated against, and texturism, where the looser or straighter your hair texture is, the more value you have in society. This new definition is needed because you see the intersectionality of privileges and disadvantages in people's lives. And contrary to popular belief, this does not just affect us Black people. All right, do me a favor, go to Google, search most beautiful woman in, insert any country, India, Brazil, South Korea, Nigeria. Tell me what you see. This simple Google search demonstrates just how much whiteness and westernized features have been deemed better all over the freaking world. And it leads to these popular manifestations that maybe you haven't thought about: chemical relaxers, racialized plastic surgery, and skin bleaching and skin lightening creams. Now, my understanding of colorism goes far beyond just my own personal experiences. I'm truly able to speak toward this because in spring 2018, I joined with UT faculty and 3 other amazing students to become the Color Complex team. We were awarded money by UT's President's Award for Global Learning. Can I say cha-chang? Okay. And we were given this money so that way we can do a research and social impact project over colorism. And as you can tell by this picture with Vita, Rebecca, and Christine standing right beside me, we're all very different. But that didn't stop colorism from impacting our lives in one form or fashion. And so this really pushed us to look at this issue through a global and comprehensive lens. So first, we did our qualitative research at UT Austin with a total of 20 interviews with both Black and Asian female students. We were asking questions that were unbiased, trying to understand their thoughts around beauty, identity, and self-worth. Then the following summer, we went to Accra, Ghana, and did similar research at the University of Ghana, Legon. We were able to achieve around 40 interviews with local women on campus and a local fishing community in Shokor. All of this research helped us see that there's universal themes. Both populations were connected through colorism. For instance, how many times have you heard this phrase from somebody you know? Don't go outside in the sun for too long. You're gonna get too dark, too dark, too dark. That's a saying people say when they don't want your complexion to be darker than what it already is. We found that this was something that more common than not was an easy quote for people to relate to. One of our biggest discoveries was that colorism is reinforced through everyday language and social encounters. It can be your family, friends, colleagues who create an environment of discrimination with just merely their words. This common hesitancy of getting darker might seem harmless, but in reality, it only furthers the stigmas of colorism. This theme of social language really impacted both Black and Asian students at UT Austin. Even in Ghana, we saw how it ultimately amplified the culture around skin bleaching in the country. Which brings me to my next main theme. While we were in Ghana, we saw that the majority of the darker skin complexions within the population was not really being reflected in the media. Television, radio, ads, anything, most of it all said that to be anything positive in life, you have to become something that isn't naturally you. This theme of lack of inclusive media representation was something we saw at UT Austin with our Black and Asian interviewees. Our findings were screaming that this was a huge and important part of colorism because it actually contributed to how people self-perceived. Now, I'm gonna get you with this really, really big one. This is the most important discovery that we were really able to see, which is that colorism is not just this intangible thing that you can't touch or feel, it's real and it's structural. We were able to see at UT with our research that Black women really question if they should be able to change their hair or not before job interviews. There's this perception that people, specifically Black people's hair is naturally unprofessional and unkempt. Entities even go as far as to use a sense of professionalism, work policies, and student guidelines to control and conform. This is why you have the stories like the New Jersey high school wrestler who had to cut his locks off just to be in his championship match, or the Mont Bellevue Texan high schooler who couldn't even walk across the stage unless he cut his hair. It's stories like this that really helped us to see that this is a structural issue within our society. But the last thing that I want to leave you with, one of the things that I really want you to see is that colorism stays a part of the society as long as we let it. It stays normalized unless we start to look at the deeper history. We were able to follow up on some of these themes through our teammate's story. Christina, growing up, hated how her monolids looked, and she wanted to change them. As a graduation present, her family from Korea offered to pay for her to have double eyelid surgery, just as they had done years before for her cousins. This was sort of like a rite of passage going into higher education and the professional world, but it wasn't unique. What we saw at UT was that our research pointed out a culture around Southeast Asians going abroad to get this plastic surgery because of the stigmas placed upon their features. What's even more important is that nobody really knows the deeper history around the double eyelid plastic surgery. It was actually first developed and performed by Dr. D. Ralph Miller. Y'all, that name is American as heck, okay? So you can already know that this is not an Asian person creating and developing this surgery. It was an American military plastic surgeon that created this in the 50s during the Korean War. This was created and pushed by the Korean War that really made Asians seem as an ambivalent threat. And so what you would do is have people altering eyes just to make their features look more trustworthy and good-natured. It's facts like these that show us that double eyelid surgery is not just merely a beauty choice. It was only through unlearning, relearning, and redefining that I was really able to start to see past all of this. And that's what I leave with you today. You really have to begin to unlearn all of the stuff that society has told you, relearn what's the true history, and redefine what the real value is in our society. Yes, I'm a Black woman in the US who has and still struggles with the negative connotations put with Afro-textured hair. But at the same time, I'm a lighter-skinned woman who benefits greatly from a society that upholds white supremacy all over the world. With this breakthrough, I'm determined to make my new normal anti-colorism. I ask, what will your new normal be? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Timia. I resonated a lot with what you said. I can't count how many times I've been told to be careful about getting too dark or thought about getting double eyelid surgery, and I've certainly talked about colorism. And though I've certainly talked about colorism, I never knew the longer history behind double eyelid surgery, and I'm looking forward to redefining the ways I talk with my friends and family about the beauty standards our parents hold.
I agree, Erica. I've witnessed colorism in my own community as well. And despite how people try to mask it under the facade of for your own good, it really perpetuates the problem. Instead, we should work to unlearn these perceived notions and relearn and redefine our values. That was extremely powerful how Timia acknowledged how she struggles with the negative connotations of certain aspects of colorism and benefits from the privileges of being on the other side in some aspects. This really shows that we can all reflect on colorism because we have all experienced it, whether it be in a negative or a positive way.
As always, click the link in your Eventbrite or visit this QR code to participate in the discussion about today's talks.
We're going to pause the show for 15 minutes for our break. Please take this time now to grab a drink, a snack, or have a bathroom break. We'll see you back here in 15 minutes.
Welcome back, everyone. For those of you just joining us, my name is Erica, and I'm the president of TEDxUTAustin this year.
And my name is Shano, and I'm the VP Logistics. To give you all a brief overview, this afternoon we'll be continuing our exploration of breakthrough in our performances and talks as we hear more about our professor's secret weapon, designing with green intention, and bridging the digital divide. For those of you who have been with us all day, we hope you've been enjoying our talks and performers.
I'll pass it off to Alif to tell y'all a bit more about how to get in touch with our team.
Had the pleasure of making sure that all of our team members, regardless of their committees, felt as though they were working on a collaborative team. It's important that we take a moment to talk about how this fantastic event and the team around it came to be. We have a passionate and diverse team of around 30 UT students who operate on campus as an official student org known as Texas Curators. Every single student on our team has dedicated their free time to designing, curating, and producing one of the premier TEDx events in the world. The desires we all have to share the ideas of our community is what has motivated all of us to dedicate the thousands of hours that it took to make today possible. And for that, I want to give a huge and sincere thank you to all of our team members who watched today's conference live from their homes. As incredible as our team is, however, we definitely couldn't have done this alone. The TEDxUTAustin community is much larger than just the student team. TEDxUTAustin would not exist without our university partners, corporate sponsors, and most importantly, everybody watching from home who took the time out of their Saturday to engage with our content. Our platform is worthless without you all, so thank you so much. TEDx is an organization whose goals are to share community ideas and promote positive individual action. If this is a mission that is as inspiring to you as it is to us, please consider joining our team for our Spring 2020 conference. Regardless of your major, background, or experiences with TEDx, there is an opportunity to bring your unique skills and perspectives to our organization. If you are interested in supporting what we do, but are not currently a student at UT, please reach out to our partnerships team via the website, as there are ample ways for individuals and organizations to be a part of our conference.
The website has more than just resources on how to get connected as a student. But if you, your company, or your department wants to get involved as a sponsor, please also check out that link to learn more.
Without further ado, I'll pass it back off to Shano of the past to kick off our afternoon talks.
Coming to you from the Cockrell School of Engineering, a key sponsor in making today's event possible, I'd like to personally thank Patrick Wiseman and Susie Winfield for their continued support. As the VP Logistics here at TEDxUTAustin, I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Michael Perch. But before that, I'd like to give a huge shout out to our graduated ex-logistics lead, Joyson Zhang. So thank you, Joyson. A thought leader in his field, Michael Perch is the Associate Professor in the Department of Petroleum and Geosystems Engineering with an appointment in the Jackson School of Geosciences. His expertise as a researcher and educator spans data analytics, geostatistics, and machine learning, combining these three emerging technologies to solve today's biggest problems. In his talk, Professor Perch speaks about the secret weapon he uses to break through the barriers blocking open education. He speaks on his experiences as a first-generation student, the effect of education on his life, and his desire to give back by sharing his educational products beyond campus. He aspires to be a voice for accessible engineering and science, giving access to STEM education to students across the world. Please join me in welcoming Professor Michael Perch.
3 years ago, I made a major change in my life. I was working for a Fortune 500 company. I'd grown in that company over 13 years. A large sphere of influence, a professional network. I was a subject matter expert. I traveled the world. I got to solve amazing engineering and geoscience problems. I loved that company. I really enjoyed it. And I walked away. I left it all. I took only my guitar off my office wall and a fair amount of apprehension and fear. And I became a professor at the University of Texas at Austin. It was a crazy choice. I had 2 children who were about to go to university with all of the responsibilities of putting kids through school. I had one who was about to go into middle school. It was a major disruption. To understand why I made that choice, you need to know a little bit about me. I lived a different life before. I did not see the accessibility of education. I did not see the opportunities. In high school, I was working full-time at a pizza restaurant. One night, coming home, late in the evening, it was a school night. It was dark and cold, a Canadian winter evening. I stopped at a gas station to fuel up my car. As I was filling up the car, there was another person on the other side of the pump fueling up too. Canadians talk to strangers, so we started talking to each other. Partway through the conversation, he looked at me, pointed at my car and said, "Do you know how that works?" That was weird. Well, I fumbled around with a response, something about 4-stroke internal combustion. I don't know. They said, "No, how it really works." I said, "Well, I guess I don't know." They came over to my side of the pump and drew a diagram in the frost of the windshield. It was the Carnot theoretical cycle, the engineering principles behind an engine, and they started to explain it to me. They told me that they were an engineering student at the University of Alberta and that they worked in a laboratory. And what they did was they designed more efficient engines. I was hooked. That was cool. They were cool. This was all cool. And I understood it. It was accessible. It made sense to me. The idea of engineering and science to improve a machine and to improve society, to impact society, and I could understand it. It was accessible. I wanted to be part of it. That night, I decided that I was going to be an engineer or scientist. I went shortly after that, met with my guidance counselor at the high school. Took him about a minute to review my marks and turn and say, "Michael, university is not for everybody." That made me mad. That made me scared. I knew I had to make changes. I called up the pizza restaurant. I said, "That full-time thing isn't going to happen anymore." I let the car fall into disrepair. Let the clothes get some holes in them, and I focused on marks. I got the grades I needed to get into the University of Alberta, the engineering program, and when I arrived, I was at home. I was surrounded by amazing faculty, students, ideas. It was profound. I enjoyed so much. I worked so hard. I graduated ranked #1 in my discipline in engineering. I went on to a PhD, and the rest, that's the path I took. Now we get back to the question of why did I leave and become a professor at the University of Texas? Well, the idea, the opportunity to give back to the system that had given me so much, to be a voice like that young engineering student, to be able to speak to many and tell them in an accessible manner about their opportunity to participate, to be part of that. I was so excited. I arrived on campus, I jumped in both feet. I learned about the role, engineering. I learned about the idea of the research mission, the educational mission. A professor to serve the state of Texas and beyond. I was in full on board, excited to do it. I had to make a plan though. When I left the corporation, I left everything behind, remember? So I had to build a network. I didn't have a network outside the company. I had to support my students. I had to add my voice to the chorus supporting STEM. And so I started to devise a plan, and I started to look at all of the synergies, all of the opportunities, how everything would work together, my grand plan to be able to truly give back and have an impact on many people. And I started to work on that. I thought, I'm a professor now, so I have a platform. I have a voice now. I can speak. I went on Twitter. I opened up an account. I started to make statements. Spatial data is biased. We got to do something about that. No one cared. Well, Ricardo Olea had a great primer on geostatistics and data analytics, my discipline. Nobody cared when I shared other people's resources and work. Well, I knew health and safety and the environment were important, so I talked about that, and still no one cared. I remembered that social media often is about rage, so I thought I can do that. I put my beret on and I started to rage a little bit. I said, repeatable research now. And of course, nobody cared. What was going on? I took a step back and I thought about what was happening. And what I realized was I had nothing to share and nobody was listening. I had started all strong and enthusiastic, excited about my role, and over what seemed to me to be a string of disappointments and perhaps failures, I started to become a little bit worn down. I was on the road every week, knocking on every possible door, talking to every possible stakeholder, trying to make any deals I could to support my program, to get my students supported. I started to get a bit discouraged. I started to wonder if maybe I was capable, maybe a bit of imposter syndrome sunk in. I thought critically about what was going on. And what I realized was it was like I had this tank. And the tank was mostly empty. All I had was maybe some of my musings, my ideas, and other people's resources. And it was like I had a tap, and the tap was just dripping and making a little puddle. But on the other side was this wall. And the wall was blocking me from that goal of truly having impact with my voice, network, insisting and supporting my students to truly give back. And that puddle was not going to erode that wall away. I was stuck. About that time, I took a step back and I thought, well, I'm an educator. I'm here to teach. I'll focus on that, focus on supporting my students. What I did was I looked at all of the intellectual hurdles along that path from where I started to where I was now. And I looked at each one of them, each one of the complexities, and I tore them apart and I designed tools, resources, bridges to help students to be able to get past each one of those intellectual hurdles. The resources expanded. Well-documented workflows, codes, interactive workflows where people could play with the machines. The best way to learn is to play with the machines. Even on the weekends, I was coding a Python package in spatial data analytics just days before my students would use the code to gain experiential learning, fingers to keys. Now, I took a step back and I looked and I realized that I had all of these great resources. It was like that tank was full of good resources. And I was starting to do a better job supporting my students, but it was like it was all just leaking out like water from a sieve and making a puddle. It's a bigger puddle now than before, but it was not going to erode away or destroy that wall and get me to where I really wanted to be. Once again, I reflected on what was going on. I thought, now with all of these great resources, maybe this is the time for me to think about my voice again. And I did that. I started to work with my voice. I started to look carefully at the inventory of resources that I had built. And I realized that these are not just resources, these are products, valuable products. Products that can help a student gain new skills and knowledge, products that can help a working professional gain new skills and add more value, products that can help a person who's not considering STEM to maybe think about STEM because something was accessible and they saw it was powerful, like I did so many years ago. I realized I needed to find a way to take those products and project them at the wall, focus them so they don't just dribble away. To me, I needed a jet nozzle to put some force behind that potential energy. And to me, that jet nozzle was social media. All of those products could be focused at the wall and allow me to bust through that wall and get to my goal of truly having impact, building that network, supporting my students, and also adding my voice to the chorus of STEM. It was perfect. And YouTube, each one of my carefully recorded lectures could fit within playlists, well presented for anyone in the world to be able to watch and understand. They were all linked to GitHub, where all of the well-documented workflows, interactive demonstrations were available for experiential learning, and all of the Python package and other codes and algorithms to support people. And then on Twitter, I could take on a new voice. And that voice, I called it the Geostats guy. And I was able to communicate positivity, encouragement, accessible science and engineering to anyone in the world interested. And people started to listen because I could point to these valuable products and people could see value, find value by tuning in. It was incredible. And the response was great. People all over the world started to listen to and use this content. Tens of thousands of people per month checking out and using this content to make impact. The thing that was amazing for me was getting feedback like a set of professors from around the world telling me about how my online content, those products, allowed them to switch rapidly to online learning with the advent of COVID, and to be able to continue their educational mission while protecting the safety of their students. I've been contacted by high school teachers who take my content and share it with their students so that they'll be encouraged to work in engineering and science, and they can see a professor who's accessible and speaking in a way that they can understand. While I was giving everything away, and it seemed like a great idea to me, but I wasn't sure. And at one point, the Cockrell School of Engineering, they called me up and said, "We'd like to talk to you. We've heard you've been doing something a little bit different." I was a little bit worried, to be honest. But when I sat down with them, what I found out was that they thought it was really cool. They wanted to promote it. They gave me a platform through the interview to promote this idea of just sharing all of the content. What is a professor's secret weapon? It's to make and share valuable products on social media. As simple as that. What's the benefits? There's so many of them. First and foremost, imagine all of my lectures are openly reviewed by anyone in the world. I mean, literally, I've been in arguments or debates, but prior to a lecture, to discuss issues or opportunities to improve. To the German professor who corrected me, "You're right, I made a mistake in my assumption of homoscedasticity, but we got it right in the end." To my students, many students will contact me interested in my courses. I get to point to all of the content and say, "Go ahead, look, see what I teach, and now you decide whether or not you want to invest your time, your resources to join me on this journey." And guess what? The demand for my courses does not wane. In fact, it's the opposite. I have to keep adding seats. In addition, I can offer my students something beyond the semester, evergreen content that will continue on perpetually. And it does. I tell the students on the last day of class, the door remains open. We're family now. Come back, check out the content, keep working with us. And it happens. Students who are in full-time hires, students who are in internships, students who have moved on to the next year are contacting me and using these resources in order to continue building new skills and adding value. Now, what this results in is a lot of working professionals. I go to companies all the time, and working professionals tell me that they're using my content in order to gain new skills. People are afraid in this digital transformation. They're concerned about job security, and we can provide them brand new tools, powerful skills to be able to keep adding value. In addition, new collaborations open up. All kinds of potential stakeholders and collaborators want to work together with myself and my students. It's been wonderful. It's a great thing indeed. Finally, if you are in touch with the practice, you're in touch with the community, it's a pipeline of research ideas that supports my team. But besides all of this, the most important thing to me, I go back to that gas station, that cold winter night in Alberta. And I imagine tens of thousands of individuals are using my content every month. How many of them might be just like I was? And will realize by accessible products in technology that they themselves could also participate and join us. We can remove the barriers and we can make our campus a more welcoming place by going beyond our campus. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Professor Perch. I think it's amazing how one experience can change a person's life trajectory. I'm sure the college student that was making small talk at the gas station could have never expected that that conversation would lead to a professor impacting the lives of tens of hundreds of thousands of students around the world. It really makes you think about how you can have such an impact on someone else's life without even knowing it.
It does. I don't know about y'all, but I've certainly had classes, whether I like the subject or not, where I haven't felt connected to anything bigger than what was happening in the classroom. I think it's incredible the support system Professor Perch has built for his students and the community he welcomes people into through both his classes and his resources.
Again, check out our Padlet through your Eventbrite link or the QR code to discuss with everyone else watching today.
As you guys dive into that discussion, I'm incredibly excited to introduce y'all to our next set of performers. Iggy and Andre are both incredible poets and storytellers who are a part of ComeTry, an exciting, energetic new art form that blends performance poetry and stand-up comedy into clean, clever, observational entertainment.
Traffic signs kind of suck. Usually only seen after it's too late to do anything about. Warning, major construction 1,000 feet ahead. Yeah, after I spent the last 2 hours sitting in traffic due to said construction. Or that one random deer sign. That looks way more like an advertisement for majestic deer. Then watch out, majestic deer may decide your car needs a new body kit. Or that sign that just says bump. Not slow down, bumps ahead. Not on level road ahead, proceed with caution, just bump. And by the time you figure out what bump means, you're airborne thinking, I just have my wheel alignment done. These signs can be incredibly unhelpful. But some signs, if gone unnoticed, can be life-threatening. I remember staring at my steering wheel. Signs are only useful before they're needed. Hands at 10 and too far gone. Caution, proceed with care, because the concrete I am made of might falter. Wondering at what speed I'd be able to make these memories stop chasing me. Everything has a breaking point. As I repeated, I can't do this anymore. Pressure can burst pipes. I can't do this anymore. Pressure can bend the strongest resilience. I just can't do this anymore. Pressure can squeeze a diamond out of cold dust or create a black hole. Impressions of pain are usually written on warning signs no one else can read. Tears racing down my cheeks as giving up living raced through my mind. And windshield wipers can only do so much in a hurricane. I wouldn't want you to know anyway. So I told my story to things I wouldn't ask questions. To dirty formats. To an empty parking lot. To no one or someone who would take my confessional as a comedy routine. What they don't tell you about depression is that most of us won't call it that. So deal with it by pretending it isn't eroding you away. Warning signs sometimes look like, I'm okay. I'm not okay. Just tired. And cry myself to sleep. Just been busy lately. I keep my feet moving so my pain won't catch up to me. Because when my mind idles, I will stall out emotions, flooding engines, preventing me from changing gears. And I cannot be inconvenienced to anyone else. So I compartmentalize my pain. Throwing the pieces of me I don't want you to see under my backseat presentations of, I'm fine. Taking a one-way trip to gone. I'm trying to outrun the old model of me. Afraid to look in the rearview mirror, fearing I won't see happiness again. What they don't tell you about depression is that it follows you. And I drove halfway across the country. Left blinker flashing, and I'm unaware of it. To find my depression waiting for me. Just drive, Iggy. Ignore the flashing maintenance signs. Drive to a city with so many people. You can't help feeling lonely. I was alone in a clown car of an apartment, staring at a bottle of codeine like if I could just get to the bottom of it, I'd find peace, so I downed it. All. Exhaling as it started numbing the pieces of me full of broken edges. Living was more than I could cope with, so I decided to see what death was like. But as my will finally broke, my body refused to let me go. I lived on accident until I began to start doing it on purpose. Bear with me. Bear witness to the time I spent 8 months living in my car. When your closet is the trunk of a blue Oldsmobile, every road has a fork full of fear. I am empty. I'm the wrong turn down a dead end. I cry at night, but only after the parking brake is put on, startled every time headlights flash in my direction and wake up to recall how inadequate I am. I tell no one. Don't get scared, Iggy. Tomorrow, you will find a better place to park, a better place to break down. What they don't tell you about depression is that it never fully goes away.
You just learn to read the signs.
You just learn to fight back.
By recognizing when it's trying to drive from the passenger seat.
You learn to put your seatbelt on.
By telling friends, I've been thinking about crashing lately.
By saying I'm not fine, and that's okay.
By reminding yourself that even though it is a part of you, you are not your depression. You are not your depression. You are not depression. It is just a part of you. And you know how to read the warning signs now.
Thank you, ComeTry, for that powerful performance. Please check out their website in the description below to learn more about them and the different types of events and performances they put on. Passing it off to Zayn now to introduce our 5th speaker of the day.
Creative team here at TEDxUTAustin is all about finding unique and powerful solutions to various design problems. It could be building the set for our speakers or designing a logo for our theme, but when Claire, Jess, Jack, Luke, and I are given one of these tasks, it is up to us to navigate the entire creative journey. But while we have spent the last year doing fun graphic design and installation art projects, our next speaker has been hard at work on a much more challenging and important design problem. One that works to ensure the sustainability of our most precious resources while creating a more green world for us all to live in. Now, I am willing to bet that every single one of you watching has a phone like this. I may even be talking to you through the speakers on it right now. But these engineering marvels are packed with extremely rare and valuable materials. So why is it that when we all inevitably get a new one in a few years, this one's going to end up either in the trash or a random drawer collecting dust? The electronics waste issue is absolutely huge, intimidating, and has no perfect solution. But that hasn't stopped Pooja Trivedi from attacking it head on when she became a recycling innovation engineer for Apple last summer. In this role, she became intimately familiar with the entire life cycle of their products, understanding how decisions made when designing a device could have serious sustainability implications when it reached the end of its life cycle. Through her time at Apple and as a BME graduate from UT, Pooja has learned that in order to create a more sustainable world, we need to fundamentally rethink the way we design products. Recently, she has been exploring and defining new ways that we can design products with sustainability as a core consideration from the very beginning. In her talk today, she will be sharing the lessons that she's learned with you. So please welcome Pooja Trivedi.
Done with that water bottle? No problem. Go ahead and toss it in the recycling bin and hope it doesn't end up in the landfills. We as consumers can do everything in our power to shop at thrift stores and buy secondhand, to compost our food scraps at home, or even eliminate single-use plastics and try to live zero waste. But what about complex systems like phones, cars, and planes? There's very little that you and I can do in order to ensure that each material and each part is handled responsibly. This is up to government regulation and companies to ensure this. An alarming 10 to 11 million vehicles reach their end of life every single year. And while the average individual understands the complexities involved with developing and designing something like a car, most don't consider the difficulties, especially as it relates to recycling. To combat this, it's time we start understanding the challenges that these systems are imposing on us and design with green intention. But What is green intention? It's the idea of designing something with the intent to recycle it. Now, let's take a step back and draw some inspiration from nature. When an organism reaches its end of life, nature has a plan on how to recycle it. Decomposers can recycle dead animal and plant matter into carbon and nitrogen, which gets released into the soil, air, and water as nutrients for new plants and animals. This helps keep the flow of resources available in the environment. Similarly, we need to have a plan for when our products reach their end of life. Now, let's take a look at the life cycle of a product. First, raw materials are mined and harvested directly from the earth. They then go through some sort of processing or manufacturing, and then the product, be it a car, phone, plane, or electronic, the product hits the market. There are also social and marketing pressures associated with the life cycle of a product. Like, for example, you might have a phone that's totally functional, but decide to toss it because it's no longer fashionable or current. It's up to the user to determine how long the lifetime of the product will be. Another example is if you have a car and you use it for 20 years, and all of a sudden you want a new one or you totaled it, then this and this, these are car graveyards, and they're actually common throughout the entire world. Now, raise your hand if you want to be the person taking care of this mess. Yeah, me either. And to make it even more difficult, there are no instructions. There are a bunch of materials mixed into what looks like one part. The parts are hard to remove from one another. And there is a coating of paint all over the car, which is practically impossible to recover. To top it off, there are flaming batteries in there that will explode on you if mishandled. This is footage of someone making a tiny puncture in a phone's lithium-ion battery pouch. As you can see, it bursts into flames almost immediately and releases a toxic odor when the lithium from the battery reacts with moisture and oxygen in the air. In a matter of seconds, this tiny device that everybody has in their back pockets can do as much damage as a hand grenade. In an electric car, there are around 7,000 of these lithium-ion batteries. Now just try to imagine the damage that could occur if a recycler goes into work and accidentally mishandles a charged car battery. And multiply it again to look like this. It feels impossible, right? I have worked as a recycling innovation engineer at a tech company. I have hands-on experience dismantling, recycling, and disassembling electronics. I know what it is like to be in charge of a mess like this. From that experience, I can tell you that it's going to take time, maybe years for R&D to figure out how to recycle the device. And once they do, it will cost a lot of money to pay for the associated operating labor and to implement the disassembly device. And after all this time, money, and effort, it will pull more resources from our environment. It's like we're working backwards. It's a never-ending cycle if you begin to think about how to recycle the recycling device. It's time we start to challenge the status quo and design with green intention. We are the future of design, architecture, engineering, retail. There might be future policymakers or educators in this room who can and should build this notion into their curriculum. It is imperative that we change our thinking and our intention to understand these concepts for our planet's greater good. So before diving into the details of product design, let me tell you a bit more about recycling. First, at its core, recycling depends upon ease of disassembly. Think about it. The easier it is to take something apart, the faster it is to determine the materials within it and send it to its respective downstream recycler. Like, for example, metal will get sent to a smelter, whereas glass gets crushed, melted, and reformed. Currently, designers and recyclers don't work together. Once the product reaches its end of life, that's when the recycler has to figure out how to take care of it. This is why designers, recyclers, and engineers should collaborate from the start of product design. This is beneficial from both a sustainability and business perspective. That being said, they should work together to build disassembly instructions into a manual when the product is first released to avoid confusion when the time comes for it to be recycled. Next, source from recycled materials. Don't rely on taking from the earth every time that you need something. Adidas has been making these ocean plastic shoes. Think about it. Ocean plastic has negative value, and they are recovering it and selling it to you for over $100. Create a take-back system like Apple Trade-in. Apple pays their users a small fee in exchange for old devices so that they are the ones responsible for recovering and reusing the precious materials within the device. Discourage the production and consumption of single-use products and plastics like plastic bags, plastic water bottles, even paper towels. If these items take 450 years to decompose, why are they only being used once? It doesn't make any sense. Packaging as it relates to products and food is highly wasteful, and this is a problem that should have been taken care of yesterday. A more realistic use of single-use devices is within the medical field, where equipment needs to be sterilized prior to a procedure or surgery to avoid contamination, like syringes and pipettes and other medical devices. This is a good example of where innovation and proper waste management is necessary rather than halting production altogether. So these are a few ideas that scratch the surface of recycling. Let's look at more about what makes a product a good product. First, durability. Durability has to do with how it's made, the materials within it, and its structural integrity. Next is aesthetics. Aesthetics has to do with how it looks, how the impression is, the colors, the paints, and the overall feel. And finally, if it's an electronic, it must have a power source, like a battery, a charging cable, or fuel. So how can we implement green design and green intention into these three elements that make a good product? First, aesthetics. Avoid using contaminants. Use biosorts, paints, and glues where you can. Also, avoid using fasteners and screws. The less materials there are, the better. Don't compromise on the look of the product, but keep these ideas in mind while designing. Next, looking at durability, don't mix materials. For example, an everyday hanger could be made from wood and metal, or boxed water, which is made from paper and plastic. These items require an extra separation step when the time comes for recycling. Instead, just design with one material in mind, like a fully plastic or fully wooden hanger or fully aluminum can. On a larger scale, something like a car door will go through a shred and sortation. And once the pieces are shredded, all the materials will be thoroughly mixed together. And sortation is a lengthy sequential process that includes separations like vibration, density, magnetic, even stainless steel separation. And these often yield low purity results. It's better if we reduce the amount of materials that we have to begin with so that these output batches will be more pure and better for reusability. And finally, looking at power. Electronics contain precious metals like gold, silver, platinum, and even copper, and also rare earth magnets. It is imperative for economics that these are the easiest to remove, since they're the hardest ones to mine from the earth and the most expensive ones. Reusing and recovering these precious metals properly is a huge step in the right direction. And while precious metals occur in small quantities, they can really add up. All 5,000 of the 2020 Japan Summer Olympic medals were made from recovered precious metals from recycled electronics. That's 6.21 million phones diverted from the landfills and their precious metals all recovered. These ideas scratch the surface, but the future of our products and our planet is in our hands. And while these are great first steps for short-term and small-scale change, we need something that disrupts and disregards the status quo. For true exponential long-term change, fields like creative biomimicry or soft robotics, even creative reuse projects like those Japan Olympic medals and the Adidas plastic shoes, and of course, reducing the amount of flammable and toxic chemicals used in our power sources. Now, I mentioned earlier that nature has a plan for when an organism dies, and similarly, we need to have a plan for when our products reach their end of life. But what if we take that a step further and look at how nature creates in the first place? Everything in nature is grown whereas everything that is man-made is assembled, part by part or brick by brick. Neri Oxman from the MIT Media Lab has taken this notion to the next level at the crossroads of environmental biology, art, architecture, and computational design. She has been creating structures made of one single material and one single part. She can control parameters of her structures like movement, mobility, structural integrity, and rigidity, all by simply manipulating its material properties. This is an image of Neri Oxman's silk dome. It covers 100 square feet and was grown, keyword grown, by 6,000 live silkworms. Compare this to a man-made dome, which is made up of a bunch of screws, fasteners, and hundreds of industrial metal rods. All of Oxman's creations are sourced from nature, and more importantly, they're designed for decay. Hear that? Designed for decay, meaning they return straight back to nature when the time comes for them to be recycled. Her research is the epitome of designing with green intention. Now, another noteworthy field is soft robotics. Soft robots mimic the way living organisms move and adapt to their environment. This is footage of a Harvard-designed octopus-inspired robot. It uses microfluidic movements to move, compared to a typical robot, which would use rigid mechanical movements. In the case of a robot's end effector, and an end effector is the claw or the hand at the end of a robotic arm, soft robots are made up of less materials, less fasteners, and less screws. And this is in line with the principles of designing with green intention, compared to a typical robotic claw or hand, which would be made up of several parts, screws, and fasteners. I want to make it clear that green design and green intention should not be seen as a burden or a chore that slows down progress, but rather something that facilitates it and allows advancements in a more sustainable way. Finally, looking at power. It is so important that we eliminate the use of toxic and flammable chemicals. Companies like Aminox have developed this lithium-ion battery that you could shoot a bullet through with no flaming reaction from the battery. This is already worlds better for the recycler, knowing that they can go into work without the worry of a battery exploding on them. At the crossroads of creative biomimicry, soft robotics, and safety power research lies the green design revolution. While this might be the greatest engineering challenge of our time, creativity and technology are moving in a direction where we can and should reverse the damage done to our planet. Let's make car graveyards and flaming batteries and single-use products a thing of the past. The bulk of environmental damage is done by large corporations, and it's unfair to assume that bringing a reusable bag to the grocery store is going to solve this problem, although it is a necessary step. It will take the union between businesses and creative engineers and decision makers to have the greatest impact. And while we do have some personal stakes in this, as I mentioned earlier, it requires a major disruption of the status quo. One day, you might be the next person designing the electric car or writing environmental policy. But until then, you can still affect positive change. You can choose to vote with your dollar and spend on products that were made with the end of life in mind. Learn how to dispose and recycle your electronics and batteries correctly, and more importantly, push your companies to give you clear instructions on how to do so. And finally, get educated on what you can do within your field. This is a problem that we should be taking on so that our planet doesn't have to. And with that, I hope you start living with green intention.
Thank you, Pooja, for showing us the importance of designing with green intention. I know that I'll be viewing the things I buy, whether they be phones, cars, or water bottles, with a new critical lens before I buy.
You're absolutely right. And as an engineering student, this topic is relevant to me both as a future professional and as a consumer. Like Erica said, I'll start to evaluate what I choose to consume with a lens that keeps the product's end of life in mind. And when I begin working, I'll also try to create things with sustainability in mind. With the climate crisis and all the natural disasters we have witnessed these past few months that can be linked to it, designing with green intention should be a priority for all products. There's no time to wait.
As always, scan the QR code here or use the link in your Eventbrite email to participate in the discussion about Pooja's talk. With that said, our next performance needs no introduction from me. I'll let them tell you about what they've prepared.
Hey everyone, hope you've enjoyed the speakers thus far. Welcome to Ballroom Breakdown. My name is Jordan, and today I'm joined by my wonderful co-hosts and cultural critics, Sarah and Jenny.
Hey everybody! So these girls have been waiting to hit the ballroom floor ever since everything shut down. Tonight, we'll be featuring some of the up-and-coming statements of ballroom in this segment we like to call...
The category is
Breakthrough. Speaking of breakthrough, let's talk about this breakout star, Malik from the House of Blahnik.
Girl, it's Blahnik. Put some respect on this legendary house.
In the year 2000, Jay Blahnik founded the House of Blahnik to be a safe space for Black and Latino, gay, and transgender individuals for self-expression. On the ballroom floor, Blahnik has been known as the undeniable house with talent that dominates in every category, nationally and internationally. With a focus on family and social causes like HIV prevention and awareness, and the only house in ballroom to give academic scholarships. In 2020, the House of Blahnik was deemed iconic and placed into the Ballroom Hall of Fame and celebrated the 10th year of being legendary. So much like swag and like attitude. And that smile doesn't lightens it up. It's like attitude with a little bit of sweet and sour. We call it that.
Do you understand? Do you understand? Do you understand? Ow! Do you understand? Do you comprehend this? Do you understand?
The hammer? I'm the hammer.
Do you understand? Do you want out? Do you
Literally sing it throughout his body. Like it's just from the hands, the arms, the shoulders, the eyes, even the hair, little puffs. That's very cute. Who's next? Who's next? Up next, we have the House of Baldwin doing a tag team performance. Leo Baldwin and Prince Baldwin. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. James Baldwin. The illustrious House of Baldwin was established February 14th, 2020 by a group of like-minded queer individuals who will to make a difference in their communities and ballroom. They pay tribute to the iconic author, activist, and playwright James Baldwin through their name. The House of Baldwin's goal is to usher in a new era of knowledge, progression, and connection for the LGBTQIA+ community in the South. As a house, Baldwins stand on triumph, grace, and excellence. Oh, the timing, it's giving gay sport. Breathe life. Okay. Oh, bam. That was a slow-mo little drop. Okay.
Wow, that was really good.
Girl, that was some professional, like, that stuff was in different areas.
Mm-hmm. So, Jordan, we know you have an eye for a tag team performance. Any thoughts or comments?
That, mwah.
Did you see their virgin performance earlier?
Let's take a look. Stallion beats.
Now listening to the sounds of
Oh! Okay. Ooh, I like that.
Oh, that's right. The gays are so versatile. Okay.
That's some strong keys. Like,
strong.
Those are some Megan Thee Stallion.
No, literally. That was good. That little drop. Yeah. There's a lot of handwork going on. It looks good. They haven't, you know, not only that hit, but they smooth. There's a lot going on here. I like it.
I'm feeling like Tyra Banks. Where are
a little Cuban link on the neck?
Oh, Simone Biles. Ooh.
A little smile, okay? Preparing us for what's to come. Ooh, that little twist. Oh. Ooh. Oh, a little shoulder, okay. This is very much like Cyclone for the Disturbance.
I love that cape.
This is what they mean when they say climate change. That was good.
Oh, they were so good.
Right? Oh, I wish there was a way to figure out who had the best breakthrough performance.
Well, you're in luck because you can scan the QR code or type in this link, www.notesofhype.com/TEDxUTAustin-1.
Wow, thanks, Jordan. So you're saying we just have to scan the QR code?
Or go to the link?
Yeah, that's really easy. I'm actually just going to do that right now.
I really like the performance where
And for the girls in the back, again, www.notesofhype.com/TEDxUTAustin-1. Thanks for tuning in.
Ooh.
It's giving Birdman.
For those of you who may not have gotten the references, from Paris is Burning to Pose to Legendary, Ballroom Breakdown pays tribute to the ballroom scene in the South. They highlight real people and performances to allow you all to engage with contemporary queer culture. To echo what has already been said, scan the QR code or go to Notes of Hype to vote. A giant thank you to Hypatia for organizing and to all of the incredible creators and performers who are part of Ballroom Breakdown. Now I'll pass it off to Evie to introduce our final speaker.
As VP of Communications this past year, we worked together towards a mission of connecting TEDxUTAustin with students, faculty, and the greater Austin community. On our team, we had Maria de los Angeles Villarreal and Jesse Park running the blog, and Kevin Shee and Iris Lee running our social media at TEDxUTAustin. But the growth of social media and technology also comes with growth of the digital divide. Our next speaker is a digital equity advocate and junior studying business honors and government. He has led research into expanding broadband access during the COVID-19 pandemic as a public policy fellow for Next Century Cities. I am pleased to present to you our next speaker, a proud Laredo, Texas native, Oscar Armando Lopez III.
When Robert Kahn and Vince Cerf developed some of the protocols that were at the heart of the early internet, they never could have imagined what it would one day become. At the time, the internet was this abstract thing, a global network of information. But over time, it's become what we know and rely on today. The internet has connected our world, bringing us closer than ever. It's compiled the world's knowledge, giving us the most complete telling of our history, and has given us answers to some of life's most thought-provoking and deep questions, such as, if a guy doesn't know how to ride a bike, could any girl love him? I'll let y'all think about that one for a second. Now, yes, the internet does give us the ability to watch our favorite YouTube videos, catch up on a new season on Netflix, but it does so much more than that. Organizations and websites like vote.org have made it easier than ever to register to vote and find a polling location. Job applications are increasingly moving online. And emails give 20-somethings a reason to never learn how to write a letter. And y'all, I know it looks a little difficult, but it's not that hard, y'all. Just put a stamp on the envelope, give a little lick, send it off. It's that easy. In an increasingly digital society, access to the internet is a requisite to participate in our world. And in a global pandemic, as our lives go from looking like this to this, we can no longer refute just how important the internet is. For those who don't have access to a doctor in their area, or for those that are the high-risk category and so they can't visit their doctor right now, telehealth services give them the ability to continue with their healthcare. For small businesses that are struggling to stay afloat, online marketplaces and food delivery apps give them a lifeline for survival. And for us, all of us, the internet has been major for finding tips and things we could do to help fight this virus. The internet is no longer just a place where you post pictures of all the bread you make, and y'all, there have been so many pictures, but it's become an extension of who we are, an extension of our lives. Now, broadband is a term that's used to describe a high-speed internet connection. And despite its importance, so many people today don't have access to it. 31% of US households do not have access to a broadband connection. And a majority of these people are low-income and minority individuals. So we're seeing a growing divide among socioeconomic and racial lines. Cost is the leading reason a person would not have access to broadband. And so in the middle of a public health crisis, as so many people are losing their jobs or facing severe financial difficulty, I only imagine that this divide is getting wider and wider. For so many people, access to the internet is not a luxury. It's the path towards socioeconomic mobility. And what we're increasingly seeing is that those communities that lack access, those people, they're having to jump over hurdles just to survive and be a part of this world. There's no place or situation where I think the digital divide is most prevalent than the ways that it affects a person's access to education. Right now, many schools are going online. all in the hopes of curbing the spread of COVID-19. And while this is a really great move and measure, it must be done in a way that doesn't leave anybody behind. Now, let's look at what the digital divide really looks like, what it really is. This is a picture of two little girls sitting on the street of the Taco Bell, all with the hopes of using the free Wi-Fi nearby. And I want you to really take a look, take a pause, and analyze the details in this picture. You've got workers wearing masks, these girls on the floor. You start to really gain an understanding of what this means. In the middle, what is arguably the worst public health crisis in 100 years, these two little girls are sitting outside in the hot sun, not at their homes, in a Taco Bell parking lot, all with the hopes of getting their education. It's horrible. It should never be the case. This is a picture of Miss Annalise Solis and her 5 children. Miss Solis doesn't have an at-home internet connection. So the only way that her kids are able to participate in online learning is by sharing the one mobile hotspot that she has. If you and I get frustrated whenever a Netflix episode takes more than a few minutes, a few seconds to load, imagine the frustration of not being able to participate in your classes or finish your work because of slow, inadequate internet. The truth is that this situation is nothing new. This didn't just start happening because of the pandemic. It's been going on for years now. 70% of teachers nationwide before this pandemic were assigning homework that required an internet connection. And 17% of students have said that they've struggled to complete their work because they didn't have adequate access to the internet or a computer. In my hometown of Laredo, Texas, I've been seeing this issue for years. In 2017, Laredo was named the worst connected city in the United States, with about a third of residents lacking an at-home broadband connection. And last year, I sat down and spoke with one of these students. I wanted to learn more about what their experiences actually were. And what they told me was horrible. Every day, having to get up extra early so that they could do their work using the school Wi-Fi. If they didn't finish by then they take their lunch break off to continue to work and use that connection. If by that point they still weren't done, then they stay at school extra late, doing all that they can. And if even by that point they had not finished, then they do what they could. Going to a library, going to a fast food restaurant. And if by the end of the night, they couldn't finish all of their work, which is common for students, work takes time, then they'd have to start the cycle all over again. Waking up early the next morning to get work done, and over again and over again. Missing out on sleep, having a constant stress about how they were going to finish their homework. That's the reality for so many people. And it's not just a reality for these people we've talked about today. There are stories like it that can be heard and found all across the country. Think about that. A student shouldn't be held back because of what they don't or do have access to. Access to the internet should not be the thing that determines a student's future success. We have to change that. Now, the good thing is that there is some work being done to help close the digital divide in the context of this pandemic. Those 2 girls we saw earlier, they were connected with their local school district and were given hotspots so they could complete their work. And in Laredo, the school districts have been working towards ensuring that every student has the resources they need for online learning. These are great steps, but we have to keep working to tackle the issues that are at the very core of the digital divide. How do we do that? What do we do? Well, it starts with looking at broadband's connectivity issue. Across the US, there are tribal lands and rural areas that don't even have a broadband connection. They don't even have the infrastructure that's necessary to support it. This is largely because internet service providers have deemed these areas unprofitable, unworthy for any investment. And so the reality is that we have these communities of people that are completely disconnected from the internet. And in this pandemic, disconnected from the rest of the country. Now, the government must, can, and should take action to make sure that every single American has access. And this wouldn't be a new action. This wouldn't be something that hasn't been done before. When electricity was first being installed in the US, a lot of the deployment revolved around urban areas, these densely populated areas. And over the years, we began to notice that rural areas were largely being left out. And so it wasn't until the government took action and local advocates started creating their own change that we got into a point where every single American has access to electricity. We don't even have to think twice about whether our area has access or not. That needs to be the reality that we create for a broadband connection. We also have to look at broadband's cost issue. According to a study by New America, across Europe, Asia, and North America, the United States is the area with the highest monthly broadband costs. A way that we can help remedy this is by pushing for more municipal-run broadband networks. These are networks that are owned and operated by the local community. And in many cases, they provided faster internet speeds at lower, more affordable costs. But the catch with this is that so many states across the country have laws that restrict communities from starting their own networks. You can see the states here in red are the ones that have these restrictions. Now, what this does, essentially, is that it restricts these people from seeking out the resources and opportunities that could expand their access. Another thing we could do, we could push for greater price transparency. For a lot of Americans, the price that they see when they're going to be signing up for broadband is not the price that they'll end up paying. When you factor in hidden fees, modem fees, and so much more, you end up paying a lot more than you really thought. We have to push for greater price transparency to ensure that consumers know exactly what they're paying for from the start. That way we give consumers more power and more of an ability to really choose what option is best for them and what options are actually affordable. And lastly, we need to collect more data on the current state of the digital divide. The way that the government collects data to see how many people in the US have access to broadband is through a self-reported filing that internet service providers fill out called Form 477. On Form 477, the area unit of measurement are census blocks, like the one that you see right here. Now, these census blocks could be about the size of a city block in urban areas, and they could even be as large as hundreds of square miles in rural areas. If it is found that at least one person in a census block has access to the internet, or at least one person could have access, then the whole census block is counted as having access to the internet. Think about that. When we look at this larger census block, if only one person in that area has access, or only one person could have access, then the whole area is marked and counted as having access. As you could imagine, this has led to severe overcounting. When using 2016 data, the federal government estimated that there were about 25 million people that didn't have access to broadband. But a 2018 study by Microsoft found that there were 163 million people that were not using the internet at broadband speeds. This means that millions of people are not being counted. And if they are not counted, then we don't really have a great view of what this digital divide currently looks like. It's a lot larger than what we really think it is. And so when we fail to get an actual accurate view of what this is, then we won't be able to properly allocate our resources or create solutions that can truly close the digital divide. As we continue to advance in our technology and innovate, we have to accept the inevitable. The internet is a major part of our lives. From job applications to educational opportunities, access to the internet brings a whole amount of benefit to our lives. But for those people that don't have access, those people that are having to sit on city streets, or use hotspots, or wake up early and stay up late to use the internet, these benefits are nowhere near equitable. As we continue to move forward, we have to ask ourselves a very simple question. Will we close this digital divide, ensuring that every American has access to the same opportunities that the internet brings as others? Or will we leave people behind? Thank you.
Wow, what an incredible way to close off the afternoon. With the transition to virtual learning, I can't even imagine what hurdles I would need to jump through if I didn't have access to broadband. The pictures of the girls outside Taco Bell were so powerful and serves as a great reminder that the digital divide is too real and absolutely unacceptable. As we move forward, we must not leave anyone behind.
Absolutely, Chanel. I think the digital divide is so painfully visible to us all right now. Thank you, Oscar, for breaking down the technical aspects of that divide into things so much more digestible for us. Before we close, we would love to hear how today's talks made you all feel.
And so we're going to bring up a quick Menti. If everyone can pull their phones out, go to menti.com and enter the code above. And let's see what everyone has on their minds.
I used to rule the world, seas that rise when I gave a word. Now in the morning I sleep alone, sweep the streets I used to own. I used to roll the dice, feel the fear in my enemy's eyes, listen as the crowd would sing. Now the old king is dead, long live the king. 1 minute I held the key, next the wall closed on me. I discovered that my cat.
Looks like people are inspired and empowered and moved.
I know that I definitely been feeling that way throughout the afternoon. We've had so many truly incredible people get to speak with us today.
For sure. And I learned so many new things I didn't. So informed, I definitely vibe with you.
For sure. Thank you all for sticking with us to the end of our conference. As promised, it's time for us to announce the winner of our Instagram raffle.
So drum roll.
Congratulations to Aman for winning our Instagram raffle and our $50 Brew Bike gift card.
Congratulations. Just as an announcement, the discussion on the Padlet, accessible at the QR code above, will continue to be open into the evening. So please go contribute to all the talk we've had about all the different things we've heard today. Before we sign off for the afternoon, there are a number of people we'd like to acknowledge. The first shout out goes to Kate at Arise Video Studios for filming our talks, and Ethan Tran for filming our intros and commentaries at performance. A special shout out to our incredibly talented creative director and creative team for the stage design that you saw today. A special shout out to our outstanding curation lead and curation team for bringing to us speakers who left us speechless. Shout out to communications for connecting all of you and bringing you to our conference today. Shout outs to our partnership lead, who for compiling so many incredible companies who, though we couldn't experience live, can be found on the Eventbrite splash page. Shout out to the logistics and finance team for keeping us on track and being the glue holding this conference together. Shout out to our memberships lead for making sure our entire team was unified in our efforts for this conference and for making a TED a family and home for us all. Shout out to Pyrcsz and Connor for running the live stream today. They did an amazing job. And last but not least, shout out to my amazing co-MC, Erica, our president, for doing such an amazing job today. Thank you guys, everyone, for coming out and hanging out with us today. Don't forget to check us out at TEDxUTAustin on Instagram or Facebook, or head out to our website for more information on how to get involved as a team member or sponsor.
Thank you, Shuttle, for wrapping us up, and thank you all again for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
was a wicked and wild wind blew down the door. People couldn't believe what I've become. Revolutionary sweat for my head on a silver plate. I'm just a puppet on a lonely string. Ah, who would ever wanna be king? Now I hear terrorists and a mouse ringing. Oh, the cavalry choirs
you.